Thank you for joining. We will start shortly. We will start in 1 minute, so thank you for your patience. We're just waiting for more people to join us. So 1 minute to start. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you for joining us. I'm happy to honored and happy to moderate this event dealing with domestic violence, which is a painful side effect of COVID-19. We have with us attendees from actually all over the world. We have people from New Zealand, Australia, Asia Pacific, Europe, UK, which is not part of Europe anymore, Africa, Latin America, and North America. So welcome all. Good morning to those of you who just wake up, and good night for those who stayed wake up late. And in Australia and New Zealand, it is becoming pretty late now. My name is Tal Stein. I'm marketing director at Attenti, and I will moderate this panel and session that will last up to 1.5 hours. And if I may ask our panelists to join me and open the video, I'll be happy. We have here real girl power, which I'm ruining in my presence, but I hope it will be fine. Shortly, I will ask the ladies to present themselves. But before that, a few slight housekeeping issues. First of all, this session is being recorded, and later today or tomorrow, we will share with you the link for the recording, so you would be able to view it and share it with others as well. I believe that the content is important enough and that it will be worth sharing. The other point is that we will open the floor for questions. So please use the Q&A button that you have on your screen and use it in order to write us the questions. Please do not use the chat button. It will be more messy and will interfere the use of others as well. Wendy, can you please open the video? And let me see, just a second. I do need to allow video. I forgot. Just a second, a small, okay, here it is. And from some reason, it doesn't work. Let me see. I do see you. Can everybody see? Okay, so we'll start. Let's start. Yael, hi. Yael is from Israel. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and how did you become involved in as an activist, and what are you doing on your daily when it comes to this domain? Please.
Thank you, Tal, for inviting me, and hello to everybody who's joining us from around the world. I'm Yael Scherer. I'm the head of the Survivors of Sexual Violence Advocacy Group. This is an organization that I started in late 2019. And what we do is policy change, advocacy, lawmaking, and we work within Parliament, the Israeli Knesset, and with the Israeli government. And I myself I'm a survivor of sexual abuse from my father. My father was convicted both on counts to do with sexual abuse towards me and violence against my mother. And I started this organization because of my experiences, and we deal with the policy towards sexual violence in Israel. So I usually deal with sexual violence with rape, and not especially or specifically with domestic violence, but of course they are two that go together. During the Covid-19 crisis, I sat in on Prime Minister's Benjamin Netanyahu's roundtable to do with women issues. And of course, my field was sexual violence, and all the numbers that I'm going to quote today are from this roundtable and are government numbers.
Thanks, Yael. Professor Jasna Podreka from Slovenia. I would ask you the same question. If you can please introduce yourself and tell us how you became involved in domestic violence issues. So, thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, as you said, my name is Jasna Podreka, and I am a teacher and a researcher at the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana in the Department of Sociology. So I am a sociologist. Well, I became involved in the topic of domestic violence since I was a student. That was approximately 15 years ago, when I became interested in topics related to gender equality, on topics also related to violence and criminology. And when I began to connect these issues, I found that the issues of crime, criminology, violence, inequality, and gender had to be connected if we were to capture the full complexity of the problem. And for example, when I started researching the problem of homicide in Slovenia, which was more than 10 years ago, I found out that more than half of all murders of women in Slovenia are caused by their current or former intimate partners. And the fact that women are most likely to be murdered within the family circle, where of course love and protection are supposed to reign, was an extremely shocking discovery for me at that time. And so I decided that I wanted to research this problem, especially with the question of whether these crimes can be prevented. And for my doctoral thesis, I conducted the first research on intimate partner homicide in Slovenia. And in this study, I actually tried to understand the context of these homicides and find out what are the main risk factors for these crimes in order to impact the work on prevention. And for 1 year, I also worked for the association SOS Helpline for Women and Children who are victims of violence, which is one of the leading NGOs in Slovenia, mainly working with victims of domestic violence. And for a short time, I also worked in one of their safety house for victims. And till now, I'm still their member. I work with them as a volunteer because it seems important to me that theory and practice are connected on a daily basis. I was also a member of various international projects and also of the European cost action entitled Femicide Across Europe for the period 2013 and 2017. And now I am a member of the European Observatory of Femicide. So these are probably the reason why I'm here today. Thank you.
Wow, great. Can't wait hearing what you have to say about domestic violence and how it can be, how can we fight against it, because I really believe things should happen. And I'm not sure that enough is going on in different countries. Wendy Turner-Webster, hello, hello.
See me now.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great seeing you again. Wendy participated in an earlier webinar late 2020, and she told us a little bit about her story. But I'll let you do the talking because you're doing it much better than I do. So
well, thank you for asking me to come back again, which of course I'm delighted to do because you asked why we're involved today, and I'm involved because I want to take every possible opportunity to talk about an issue which a lot of people don't want to talk about. There is a cloak of secrecy that comes over the whole subject of domestic violence. And it is a thing that very much happens behind closed doors. And what, you know, the perpetrators wanted to stay behind closed doors. So I'll do anything I can to raise the raise profile and awareness of the subject. In the UK, I'm a TV presenter, mainly known for working with arts and crafts and animals. Before I was a TV presenter, though, I was in a violent and abusive relationship for around 5 years with, this was many years ago, with someone who I married. And the violence started before we were married, so that's a long story. But when I did, years later, recovered, became a survivor, and I became a TV presenter, I really wanted to use that platform with the media and so forth to be able to speak out. And since then, I've done a lot of work with a charity in the UK called Refuge, which is the country's largest single provider of specialist domestic abuse services. And I do a lot of speaking, conferences, what have you, any platform really to get the message out there. So thank you for asking me today.
Thank you for joining. And last but certainly not least, I'll present Luna M. Luna is from a country in Latin America, which we were asked not to expose. So welcome, Luna. I would ask you the same question, how you became involved in domestic violence and why, and what are you doing these days?
Okay, thank you for having me today, and hello everyone. My name is Luna. As Tal said, I've been a victim for domestic violence 3 years ago, and I went through a long process with the justice here, and I found the holes that the justice had in my own flesh. So I started sharing my story on social media, and women all over the country started to contact me and ask me for help, because here we have a nice theory about how things can be and how things should be, and in the practice is not being as it did. So we started a foundation with another survivors from sexual abuse and domestic violence. So now we help women all over the country to get out of domestic violence relationships and to seek for help and have the help that they need to get out. We have this foundation that is called Mujeres con Alas since a year ago, and we work with all government organizations that are in our country, so we can help them as best as we can, and we try to promote and speak up for them and for the problem that we have. So that's how I reach it here.
Thank you. Wow. So much inspiration from one side, agony from the other side, and really speaking with you today is a great honor. And we know that domestic violence could end differently. And one of the questions that we have, and maybe I'll start with Professor Jasna. How bad was the situation of domestic violence before COVID? And was it impacted either to good, in a good way or in a bad way during the pandemic period up until now, probably? Mm-hmm. So I'll be happy to hear your numbers and what you have to say about Slovenia. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I would like to say that the full extent of violence against women and domestic violence is really difficult to estimate because violence against women is still underreported and stigmatized in Slovenia, and it's probably the same all over the world, which means that what is actually reported is only a fraction of the reality. In Slovenia, for example, only just over 60% of the population has confidence in the police, significantly lower than in the EU, where this confidence is more than 70%. So the first and the so far only Slovenian national survey on violence in the private sphere found that 1 in 2 women in Slovenia, which is 56%, had experienced one of the forms of domestic violence since the age of 15. And the most frequently experienced psychological violence, followed by physical violence, then economic violence, restriction of movement, and sexual violence. And 4% of women experience violence in more intimate relationship by a larger number of people. The data show that violence can begin in any point in life, from early childhood to late adulthood. And for some women, it lasts a lifetime. Almost 6% of women also experienced violence during pregnancy. Almost 5% of women reported that the perpetrator was also violent towards children, most commonly psychologically, then physically and sexually. More than 90% of perpetrators of violence in the private sphere are men. They became violent at an early age, as the youngest perpetrators in the study was 14 years old and the oldest one was 84. Non-governmental organizations in Slovenia estimate that violence occurs in 1 in 5 families in Slovenia. 1 in 7 women experiences rape, and only 5% of all women who experience violence seek help. What about the situation during the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, data from various international organizations like World Health Organization, UN Women, EIGE and others, and police data from Slovenia show a sharp increase in violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. From the beginning of January to 30 November last year, Slovenian police proceeded a total of 1,346 crimes of domestic violence, for which a criminal complaint was filed, which is 13% more than in the same period last year. They also know that in 2020, they proceed 56% more homicides and almost 20% more rapes. It is reported that the most common victims of physical, psychological, economic violence, or a combination of these forms of violence, are women, and the perpetrators of these crimes are their current or former intimate partners. What we observe as particularly worrying in Slovenia in that period is that especially the number of severe forms of domestic violence increase, and also domestic murders, which I will explain a little bit later. We can't hear you, Tal?
Yep. What numbers? Staggering numbers, really. I'll turn the same question to Luna. Luna, can you please
Yes, I'm here.
address the
Okay.
same question, please? Thanks.
We have a delay in COVID situation here. Our country is now experiencing the peak of the pandemic. So we have the numbers a little bit touched about it. In 2020, we had 1 police report every 30 minutes. It was a hard number to see, but the government, when the pandemic started, did a massive communication about the helplines that we had and the places that women can go to ask for help. And after that, we saw an increase in the calls to the helpline in between the 50 and 80%. But we saw a slightly decrease in the police file reports. We think that this decrease may be with the lockdown and home office situation, because all the perpetrators are partners, actual partners of women. So women are not in the freedom to reach out and to go to the places. So social media and helplines are the best way to ask for help, and is showing us an increase on the reach out of the women. So we are seeing a decreased number in the murders and feminicides, but we are expecting numbers for the last year, because we don't have the official numbers yet. We just only have we have 7 women murdered in 2021, and we had 21 in 2020. So we are expecting another changes in policies, so women can reach out to help more presently, not so much in the helplines, and we are figuring out how to help them to reach out and to get out of these situations.
Thank you. So you're saying that you saw a decrease in the number of murders, but at the same time, an increase, huge increase in the number of calls to the helplines.
Yes.
If I understood
Yes.
well. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. I don't know what is better, really, at the end of the day. Next is Yael. If you may share with us the numbers in Israel and what.
I think the most interesting thing is how domestic violence and sexual violence is something that is underreported, and we do hear that from other countries. But the minute that the government goes out and publicizes gives the information to the public about these hotlines or these options or where to turn to, we see an increase in calls for help. So these helplines and hotlines that the government operates or other organizations and NGOs operate are, let's say, not well known and have become much more well known now because of media attention to this problem of raising violence. So I'm actually not sure that we see a rise in violence as much as we see a growing awareness and more people asking for help. That's the first thing that I thought about when I saw the numbers. The second thing is how much the numbers are influenced by lockdowns and restriction of movements. If we see domestic violence reports to the government hotlines, let's say in June, we see that there was an increase between June 2019 and in comparison, June of 2020, we see more than 3 times as much reporting of domestic violence to the government hotline. So does that have to do with more violence towards women in a domestic setting, or is it because the government paid for ads to be in the papers? We also get more reports of restrictions against men, orders that you have to stay away from your spouse. We see a jump in the courts issuing them between June, July, and August of 2019 and June, July, and August of 2020. Is that because we have more violent men, or because there was public awareness and the judges are hearing what happens? And I really don't know. In other cases, we see a decrease. We see a decrease in reporting of sexual violence against minors, because most of the reporting came from the school system. There was no school system, and therefore children sat at home. They had no adult to report to about sexual violence against them. And therefore we saw a rapid decline in reports. Is there a rapid decline in sexual violence against minors? I don't think so. After Israel comes out of lockdown, we see a manic increase in reports, and I have the numbers here. In the ages 15 to 19, we see an increase in reporting of sexual violence. and a boom of reporting between the ages 25 and 55, and that's quite a bit of an age that's not really been reporting sexual violence against them in the past. In 2019, we don't see these numbers. So we also see an immediate decrease in women and men coming to the hospital after sexual assaults and domestic violence. We see a decrease in coming into the hospitals. And that's not because we have a decrease in people needing help. It's because people feared hospitals and didn't want to go out of their home for a medical emergency, even though they were allowed to go to the hospital even during lockdown, because they were afraid to catch a disease that was more scary than the treatment. And so the numbers that I'm seeing are, we really need to study them more. They change monthly. We have numbers going up and down. We need to study more what this comes from, and they fluctuate immensely. And so it's not a real yes or no question. I think there needs to be more study about what these numbers actually mean in more than I think 100 categories that the government has tested. It's really complex.
Wow, so a bit confusing numbers. And the question is, for example, the fact that people were confined at their homes didn't impact on the number of opportunities.
I think it increased the number of opportunities in some cases, because my organization got, unfortunately, more reports of sexual violence within families and less reports of sexual violence in, I don't know, clubs, pubs, and parties, which is a very COVID thing.
Right.
People really seek opportunities, and if they won't do it in a club, then they have a lockdown and the neighbor's 19-year-old girl is with you in your living room, and she's going to be the victim. And I think some of the numbers went down really, really low, not because the phenomenon has gone away, but because there was other issues involved.
I see. Thank you, Yael. Wendy, it is same question. I turn to you. Situation of domestic violence before COVID and throughout the period. So thanks.
Okay, so the statistics for England and Wales in particular say that 1 in 4 women will experience, this is, I'm talking pre-COVID now, these were the figures, will experience domestic abuse at some point in their lifetime. And 2 women a week will be killed by a partner or former partner. By the end of March 2019, in that year, 1.6 million women in England and Wales had experienced domestic violence. The figure that I always think is quite astonishing and is often completely missed is the rate of suicide because of domestic violence. And the figures that we've got here, as best as one can ascertain these kind of figures for suicide, is that in the UK, 3 women a week commit suicide as a direct result of their partner's abuse. And perhaps even sadder than that is that 30 women a day will attempt suicide as a direct result of their partner's abuse. And in fact, nearly 10 years ago, I made a documentary on that subject because I feel that it does very much go under the radar. In terms of what COVID and the impact that has had on domestic violence, Refugees National Domestic Abuse Helpline in that period from the lockdown last year, so March, April of last year to February of this year, calls and contacts to that service went up by 61%. And to the specialist website that goes along with that helpline, that experienced a 7-fold increase in calls and people making contact on that. I think as well, I just want to echo that what the others have said, in as much as the figures that we get are really only the tip of the iceberg, and it's actually quite terrifying to think that it is undoubtedly more than that. Whatever figures we're getting, the problem is worse. It's a vastly underreported crime. And yeah, I mean, we're saying, how bad and shocking all these figures are. And personally, I feel that they are a lot worse. We just don't officially know that yet.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep you on the screen and ask you the next question, so you will be the first to answer it. Can you, do you know, or if you don't know, can you guess what were the reasons for the increase in numbers during COVID? I'm sure that home confinement was one of them, but you see more reasons and more catalysts for domestic violence cases.
Well, for someone like myself who is a survivor of domestic violence, I could not imagine in my worst dreams a worse situation than being in lockdown with my previous partner. I cannot imagine the fear, the anxiety, the hopelessness, just the devastation of a period of lockdown where there didn't seem an end to, there was no end point in that. And I can't imagine the fear of living like that. Well, of course I can, because I used to, but psychologically, lockdown had an impact on everybody. Now, to some, it was a dream. Like me, I mean, I had a fairly good time in lockdown. It was, rather jovial time in our house, but lockdown can either be a dream or a death sentence. And unfortunately, many people had a nightmare of an experience, because I think, the abuser's there all the time. So you're treading on eggshells all the time. All the triggers that they are saying that you are provoking them, you're making this happen, you're making them so violent and angry and abusive, it's all your fault. So you're in a situation where, the man and woman together is that you are perceived to be provoking it now 24/7, let alone a few hours of the day. And of course, other triggers like then money worries, drink. I mean, my ex-partner was always more violent after drink. And there's drugs, there's frustrations of being in a lockdown will come to the fore. And just to end this off, I think the scariest point of this is that undoubtedly, with kids being at home, you think how many children will have experienced looking and being in the middle of those violent episodes of violence happening to their mother and to their pets. And that's both physical and emotional violence. And you think how many children have been actually forced to witness that. And I think we shouldn't forget that.
Thanks. Yasna, can I turn the same question to you and hear if you have maybe different view or different aspect of things?
Well, actually, I will summarize what Wendy said and add something, because what Wendy said, I think it's crucial. So, well, the main reason, in my opinion, are that during the pandemic, the factors that are also generally considered to be aggravating factors for increased propensity to violence were further potentiated by the pandemic measures. And as UN Women reported, the main aggravating factors include undoubtedly safety, health, and money concerns, as Wendy explained, cramped living conditions, isolation with the abuser, movement restriction, deserted public spaces. So in addition, we found that important aggravating factors include also the time dimension, as families and couples are forced to spend more time together, which is particularly difficult for families where violence is present. Also in general, most serious acts of violence and homicides happened on holidays and during when they spend more time together. For example, in Slovenia, we had one Christmas murder in 2018 and one also last year. Where there are also increased levels of stress and irritability on the part of the perpetrators, increased feelings of helplessness and inability to find a way out on the part of the victims. But aside that, I am sure that pandemic shows all the side effects of the way we have exploited the public sector over the years. Because investment to prevent and combat violence against women has long been being at the crisis point, I would say. Because with already limited capacities and investment to address violence against women, this increase in violence is happening at the time of further reduced capacity of service providers like health, police, social care, charities is further reduced to cope with the demand. So women are locked in with their abusers, as Wendy said, and isolated from the people and resources that can best help them. So I can say that these are the main reasons for that had an impact on the numbers which we presented.
Okay, thanks. Interesting. Yael and Luna, do you have anything to add on top of it?
I think for me, what Wendy and Yasna said pretty much sums it up, but we were really approached by a lot of women who couldn't call the hotlines because all of them required them talking on the phone. So we needed to act quickly, and we demanded that the government have hotlines that you can SMS or WhatsApp helplines, or even chat rooms, secure chat rooms, because what we saw is that people were trying to get out and couldn't. There was no way out. Even in specific cases, this is not a secret. Sometimes we need to have like an excuse, like going out shopping or to the supermarket, and then she disappears. And we've done it a few times with some kind of excuse, and she never returns. She doesn't come back. And during COVID, this was for me an operation from hell, because we didn't have any excuse to remove the victims and take care of it. And I've done things that I'm not going to expose here, but in some cases we just couldn't help. I remember one case of a 19-year-old that was living with her parents, and she was raped by the neighbor, and we just couldn't get her out in secret out of the situation. She didn't want to tell her parents because this is a very conservative society, and this has a lot of impact on her life. She wasn't ready to tell anyone. And this was during lockdown. You couldn't just have a car drive over and sweep her away. She needed to tell her parents why she's going downstairs. She's 19, still living at home and not yet a student. And if she rings for an ambulance, then the whole neighborhood knows that something happened. So we really were stuck. And this was one of my failures. We just couldn't get this girl out of the apartment in time. And this happened. We had successes, but things like this happened. People wanted help, and we just couldn't take them out of the situation.
So there's also a difference between different types of populations. So you can help people, I would say, if I understood well, you're saying a girl or a young lady from a more conservative part of the population has different challenges when fighting domestic violence or sexual.
In this case, I just think that this is the specific occasion and this is what happened. But I do think that any 19 years old girl would have trouble approaching her parents and saying, the neighbor who's a friend of yours, he raped me. This is not an easy thing to say, no matter how modern you are. This is a specific event, but I do think it is more of a problem in more conservative and more religious societies. But it's always a difficult thing to say, always.
Thanks. Luna, anything to add?
I agree with the other ones. As Wendy, Yasna, and Yael said, we share the same view here. It's very astonishing and it's really hard to see. As Yael said, we also had cases when we need to reach the women by text, by Twitter, by Instagram, by Facebook, because there's no way they can call anyone or go to any place to seek for help. So we have stayed late hours at the night talking with them because they need to wait till the aggressor is asleep or he went to the supermarket, or so you need to be there for when they can reach out. And the way that they reach out is mostly the most secret and hidden way possible. We don't have a strict lockdown, so it's easier for us to take them out. But as Yasna said, all the organizations are working not on full capacity, so you have bad timing for asking for help. And about what Wendy said about and Yasna about the high points on the aggression, we are seeing that today the women that get murdered, the feminicides, the perpetrator committed suicide after. Of 7 women that were killed, 6 of them committed suicide later. and one tried to, but couldn't. So the stress that is being on these situations are not only ending up in women getting killed or women in big trouble, but also in the aggressors committing desperate acts to get out of the situation. So I fully agree with the others, and we see the same here.
Thanks. I've also learned that in many countries, the different organizations or as a government initiative, they created some kind of a sign with the hands when you go to a supermarket or to the pharmacy. You can just, with your partner, and you want to ask for help without his knowing. So in many countries, I've heard that they've created some kind of a common known signal with hands. So you can say, I'm in trouble, please call help. So this is also one of the measures that were developed, as I understand, during COVID for all these cases where people really couldn't call for help and were with their partners all the time. Some countries are more advanced in the way that they are fighting domestic violence and others are less. What do you think should be done? And in this case, each one of you probably will cover its own country. What do you think should be done in your country in order to better fight domestic violence, decrease the numbers, and have a better situation, because this situation cannot continue. It is clear to everybody. So Wendy, maybe we will start with you.
Yeah, sure. The government, in the UK needs to adopt a fully funded national structured strategy that is not just all talk and good intentions, but actually put your money where your mouth is. And they've committed to refugees 124 million, but actually the figure needed is 176 million. So I know we're talking, lots of millions here, but that they have committed, but if it's not enough, it's not enough. And therefore there are gaps, there are holes that people are going to fall down, nets that people are going to slip through. And you can, governments can say they're committed and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Well, do it, And it seems to me a huge amount of talk and not a lot of really substantial action that's logical and makes sense. I mean, to me, surely we should be having proper money put into education at school at a really young age about respect for your fellow human being and for animals, for sentient beings, for every living thing we share the planet with, whether it be human or animal. You have to have compassion, you have to have respect and love and care, and a lot of that is just not there. I mean, it just saddens me really, when you think how many cruel and nasty, destructive, horrible people there are in this world. And I feel that a lot of that could have been negated by if you'd caught them at a young age and they've got the right sort of, life sort of skills and education then. I also think, I'm sure we're going to come on to this a bit later, but, embrace the technology that's out there at the moment. It's absolutely no point shutting the door once the horse is bolted. Let's monitor perpetrators that, by the time a perpetrator is knocking on the door of their partner after they've been released from prison seeking revenge, it's too late. Let's work to get in there beforehand. There's so much. I mean, and I'm sure my fellow ladies will have more to say on this. But you could talk all day about the lack of action with the government. So I won't talk all day, I promise you.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you, Jasna. We can't hear you. You're muted. It's okay. It happens to me all the time. So
yeah. I'm sorry. I don't have kids, so it's okay. So yeah, I would really agree with what Wendy said, and I would add that what we are facing in Slovenia, that we seem to be living in a time when, despite decreasing tolerance for violence against women and growing commitment to gender equality, a parallel stream of flawed, especially influential individuals and groups are gaining ground in the public sphere, shifting responsibility for violence onto victims and greatly trivializing the problem of the domestic violence. And for example, in recent years, there have been a number of opinions and statements, mostly related to sexual and domestic violence, that cast doubt on the victims' testimonies and question their credibility. And furthermore, perpetrators are perceived as victims to be defended. Women who speak out about violence are perceived as predators who attacked men for their own interest. And organizations in which I am also active that protect victims, who are perceived as universal enemies of men. And analysis of Slovenian public opinion, for example, on issues related to violence against women in the private sphere, revealed a downward trend in sensitivity towards violence and an upward trend in tolerance towards violence against women and victim blaming, as well as an increasing perception of domestic violence as a private rather than a social problem. So such unreflective statements, which are taking up more and more space in the public sphere, at least in Slovenia, strongly shape public opinion and cast victims' testimonies in a bad light. And the problem with such beliefs of public opinion is also that they often influence the beliefs of politicians who are responsible for systemic solutions and on people working in the institution, for example, courts, responsible for dealing with and resolving cases of violence. So therefore, I believe that one of the most important things we need to do to eliminate violence against women in Slovenia, for which I can say that we have a relatively good legislation to combat domestic violence, is to work on a regular awareness raising and education of the whole Slovenian society on the issue of violence, on the issue of violence and relationships, and also on issues of how dangerous domestic violence can be and why it is so important to respond it appropriately. Because I believe that subjects dealing with all these issues should be included in regular school curricula and implemented at all levels of school education, from primary schools to faculties. And similarly, such training should be part of formations in various professional fields, especially those dealing with victims and perpetrators of violence. And for me, another important thing that I continue to see as a key to working for combating violence against women is working with perpetrators of violence. This aspect is still too much neglected, at least in the Slovenian society.
So what I'm hearing from both of you for the time being is education, 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 and treatment of the perpetrators, and not only the victim, because in this case, you need to cut the chain, and without a proper treatment to the offender, you cannot cut the chain. Have I understood well? Is it summarizing? Yael, any something else that you want to add to it?
I think
you think that Israel needs to do?
I think in Israel we had a phenomenon that was quite amazing to watch, because for years we saw a demand for electronic monitoring, and the government said it's not possible because of Freedom Acts and because it has to do with privacy laws. And we also had a national program to combat domestic abuse, and it was never funded because the government said it couldn't take out so much money at once, and we have a financial program with it. And with amazement, I watched as the government wanted to do electronic monitoring of people coming from abroad to make sure they were in lockdown and were not spreading COVID. And the law just passed like that. Within a month, there was electronic monitoring, no privacy issues, no freedom issues, nothing. People just had bracelets and that was it. The government said we want it and they did it. And the same thing with spending hundreds of millions on certain programs. We just heard for 2 years no on funding this program, and suddenly programs that were twice as large and had less of an impact on human life just because of the COVID crisis. They put the stamp on them and funded them. And for me, as somebody who's been in this field, watching from the sidelines, I was both shocked and angered by what the government proved that it could do if it really wanted to.
That's for sure. I think we will now skip the two questions that I've had for the whole panel due to time constraints. One of the things that Yael mentioned is electronic monitoring as a mean of combating domestic violence. And Attenti does have such a solution. I will share a 2-minute video that explains this solution. And immediately after, we will talk with Luna about her experience as one that was under monitoring, bilateral monitoring, she and her perpetrator for almost 3 years. So we will watch the video. You can take time also to start sending your questions, and we will get back immediately after that to talk with Luna. So with no further ado, we will share the video. Once I'll find it on my screen, just a second, sorry. Video.
This is Janet. Janet is a victim of domestic violence who is trying to carry on with her life normally. Domestic violence is a global problem, affecting an increasing number of victims year on year. One of the common solutions to protect victims of domestic violence is a restraining order imposed by the authorities. But even when restraining orders are in place, it's difficult to enforce them and prevent potential encounters. Attenti has developed a unique domestic violence deterrence system that monitors restraining orders for the purpose of improving the victim's life significantly. The system is based on a bilateral monitoring solution that has already been successfully deployed in several countries. The aggressor is fitted with a GPS tracking unit and an ankle bracelet. while the victim carries a portable device providing the victim with peace of mind. Both the victim and aggressor are supervised by a Tentis monitoring system, which processes events and location data from their devices. In case of a potential encounter, both the victim and the monitoring center are notified. The monitoring center handles the incident according to their response protocol, while instructing the victim to take necessary precautions and go somewhere safe to avoid meeting the aggressor. If the aggressor approaches a restricted area, such as the victim's home, the victim is notified and the aggressor receives a warning message to leave the area. Once the threat of an encounter has passed, the victim is contacted and informed that the incident has been closed. We believe that it's in our hands to provide domestic violence victims the security they need and the freedom they deserve. Attenti. Feeling safe anytime, anywhere.
Okay, so now, Luna, you know this technology up close. After, as I said, you've been monitored and protected by this technology for what, almost 900 days?
900 days.
Yeah, can you tell us how and why, or how it's all begun?
Yes. Well, 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, I started a relationship that lasted 3 months with a guy that I met on social media. After some weeks passed, I started to feel that something was off. I seek it for help for therapists because I was with such a low self-esteem and I was depressed. And before I could know the reason was this guy. He hit on me after we went to a birthday party, and I ended up polytraumatized. I had to reach to a doctor because I was so bad that I needed help. And in spite that, the doctor recommended me and encouraged me to file a police report. I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I was scared and beaten.
So you were beaten by this guy and didn't want to press charges against him. What made you, at the end of the day, go and press charges and go forward and turn to the police?
Well, as the days went on, he kept insisting, harassing me, sending me messages. He was out of mind because he was consuming drugs. And one day he sent a picture of my 3-year-old son. So I realized then that we were in danger, and I went to my country's police special unit of gender-based violence and filled a report of the situation.
So he kept on abusing you and threatening you after you have cut the relationship with him, right?
Yes.
So it's not only during the relationship or friendship period, it continued after, and he kept on.
He kept on insisting and threatening, and yes, even if I didn't wanted to have contact and I asked for help from his family and friends to make him stop, he didn't. And that's why I ended up going to the police station to ask for help.
So you went to the police station and you pressed charges, and what happened then?
Well, in my country, if the police or judge certify that the perpetrator or offender is a dangerous person, has previous records, has access to weapons, or his behavior possess a risk to the victim, then cautionary measures are put in place, and a restraining order. And this may be complemented by electronic monitoring. If the situation is classified as high risk, you have a group of technicians that certifies if this is a high risk situation, and mine was one. He had previous records of violence towards other women, and his behavior and was so off that they put monitoring for both of us.
So who are these people that are doing this, let's call it what, risk assessment or something like that?
Yes, we have therapists, psychiatrists, the police, and a team. For the judge has a team that evaluates the situation. And when you are on electronic monitoring, you have a hearing where they put in place this restriction order, and you have follow-up hearings. Even for 3 months, you have a new hearing where this team gets reports to say if you are still a risk, and if you need to continue with the monitoring, or you can get off of it.
So you were having this phone, as we saw in the video, that tracked your position, and the guy had also some kind of a device, and he was fitted by a bracelet on his ankle, and all the time people could see what is your and his location at every given time, right?
Yes.
And every 3 months you had to go back to the court, and these team of people had to come with their risk assessment and say, you are eligible to continue in the program because he is still dangerous and put you in danger, or he's now okay, he's now has someone else that he wants to, don't know what. So this is the situation. Every 3 months you have to go back to the court?
Yes, theoretically, if the perpetrator doesn't, if he is still being dangerous, you have to, the prosecutors have to do a penalty they have to reach it to another judge.
Good.
And so this other judge can send him to jail, but everything here is not as good as theoretically. So we had hearing after hearing, and this jail time never came. So the risk was still high. He had more than 10 approaches in every hearing towards me. At the end of the process, we had almost 60 times that he tried to reach me. And the measures were taken so long that's why I ended up 3 years with electronic monitoring.
What a toll to pay for 3 months relationship.
Yes, it was a lot.
So I think that one of the things that is important to mention here is that the solution that you were using is the only solution in the world today that can actually verify that restraining orders are being followed. Because in other countries, when you don't have a technology, you get a restraining order, and a person and the police simply needs to count on the person that got the restraining order that is kept away from his victim. So this is, in this case, something that exists in your country. Thanks God. So this guy became less dangerous. How it all ended up, because after almost 900 days, today are not using the solution. So how come?
No, he wasn't getting better. He ended up in jail after we prosecute all the process, and my attorneys try to reach out to justice. He had a condemn, and he's now at jail, and he has 3 years of jail time. So I'm feeling secure and safe because he's on jail, but it's not always the situation for every woman. Sometimes the perpetrator just stopped the approach, and the monitoring is taking off, but he's still being a problem. And we don't have in our country, we don't have a good healthcare system, so they can work with the perpetrator and help to work with these situations and make him less dangerous if there's the chance.
So under this program, both the perpetrator and you were monitored 24/7 regarding your location. Isn't it some kind of uncomfortable or some kind of intrusion to your privacy when you know that someone always knows where you are?
No, well, it's not an easy thing to have to live on, but it's the only way, and it's what makes the difference that today I can be here speaking to you. I know it's hard and it seems hard, but when you have a violent man trying to reach to you, it's the best way I can think of to keep yourself alive. It's the difference between being alive or not. I've been asked this a lot of times, and I was feeling so secure all the time that I never think about my privacy in that moment. I needed to be safe, not and my children. I had a son, and afterwards I got married again and had a daughter, and that was the only way I could be safe. And every time I went to a hearing, and every time I had these encounters, and I had to spend time with police officers and that came to my rescue, it became more and more clear that it was the best solution that I could have at that time. The privacy thing is the second thing that you think about when you are in this situation.
The benefits are larger than the downside of it.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
It's the reason that I'm here. So
there's a question from the audience, and did you feel did the electronic monitoring system gave you an evidence that assist you to send him to jail, or have
yes.
you used the evidence from the electronic monitoring system, or How did it work?
The electronic system is placed and worked by the government and with the police. So when this guy reached out to me, there was no chance that I was saying something that it wasn't there, or that was wrong, or I had all the reports that assessed that he was trying to reach to me, and even when the police tried to make him go away, he didn't, and they had to send me a patrol officer many times. This was all in the judge orbit, so there was no chance that I needed to find the proof that he was being violent. He was, and we had all from a neutral organization. So yeah, it made a huge difference in the final case, and what made him ended up on jail. Yes.
Okay, very interesting. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, electronic monitoring is actually the only way today to enforce and making sure that restraining orders are being kept and followed by the perpetrators. At this point, I will ask Yasna, Yael, and Wendy, do you have, before we open the floor to questions from the audience, do you have anything to comment on or to ask Luna? So you have the right, the first right to ask questions here. But let me unmute you. No, I can't hear you from some reason. Just a second. Wendy wants to talk, and from some reason it doesn't work. Let's see. Yep. Just a second. We'll see. We'll look for another way. Yael or Yasna, any questions in the meantime until we will succeed to recover Wendy's line?
But Wendy, maybe you can unmute yourself, because we did it. So, but I will just add something, because I think it's very important that we learn from stories that have positive endings. And of course, Luna's story is one of them. And thank you, Luna, for sharing your testimony, because I believe it's not easy to talk of such an experience. So, and also I think that Luna's stories also shows how effective we can be when domestic violence is reported, which is very important. And when all the relevant institutions actively engage with the process of dealing with the case, and also how important is working in parallel with the victim and the perpetrators, and also to monitor the perpetrators. What happened when the report is done? Because I can say, according to my studies, that any denunciation or report of the perpetrator can in some way mean an increase in the degree of danger to the victim. Because the denunciation can be understood by the perpetrator as an interference with his position of power, which he understands to be uncompromising. So I think it's very important to have some solution which can help us monitoring and somehow working with the perpetrators after the report, to know what is going on. And was, as Luna said, to know how they react, try to find out how dangerous he is. This is something, this is all I would like to add to the testimony of Luna. So thank you, Luna.
Thank you, Jasa.
We have here, hi, Wendy.
Oh, hi, I'm back.
You're back. Did you want to ask something or say something?
Yes, but I'm sorry because I've missed what's just been said. So in fact, I would actually like to say to Luna how brave she's been in actually being able to, you know, come onto platforms like this and actually speak about it and give hope to people and just tell your story, because that just cannot be underestimated, what it takes out of you, you know, to do that. So really good on you, because there's so many people you'll be helping, you know. And when I've been thinking throughout that everything we've been talking about, you know, when you think of the women who are living all over the world just in constant fear, and what that does to society, and how it impacts on the health service, on the job market, on the economy, and it annoys me as well that it's left often to charities to pick up the pieces and pick up the shortfall, you know, from government budgets and spending. So, well, that's diverting a bit. I just wanted to say, well done, Luna.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you so much.
So we get here some questions from the audience. Luna, most of them are for you.
Okay, shoot.
Shoot, I'm shooting. Yeah. Do you think that electronic monitoring impacted directly the decrease of murder cases in your country?
Oh, yes, I guess it does. We still have a long way to work with, because on the other hand, you have a human chain of things that is not being as well as it should. But yes, last year we had 21 women murdered for former partners. We had 22 intents of murder that were cut before it happened. So, right. And if you see the numbers between the government started putting electronic monitoring and keep buying more and more bracelets and using them more, because not everyone has this solution. It has to be really clear that it's a high risk situation. We have today like 2,000 ankle monitoring being used today. But if you see the numbers between the monitoring being used and murders were going down. Not significantly, but yes, it's still being in a decrease. In a decrease of the number.
In the numbers.
Yes.
There's a question here. 3 years is long time to be under electronic monitoring. At what stage did you forget the device that kept you safe?
Never.
Ever?
No, I never forgot, because in my case, it was direct reason that I was so long with the monitoring, and it was that my aggressor was always there. So when you have an aggressor always trying to reach you, you have a device always on alarm. So you are all the time being reminded that you are on monitoring So I never forgot that I was on it. You are all the time aware that you are in danger. So that's why I was mentioning that
So
we
this
need
is
to
your
change
shield.
the human.
So this is the
So-
your shield that keeps you safe,
Yes.
and you can't forget it.
No, you can't. So sometimes for other women that the perpetrator wasn't there all the time, maybe you have this shield, but if now no one is trying to poke it, you can't forget that you have it. But if you are all the time reminding, and this has a lot of things besides the monitoring, because when he's reaching out and they cannot persuade him to let off or to go off, they had to send to you an officer to help you. So I was sometimes with my kid and I need to reach out to a patrol and get off quickly, so
Wow.
he couldn't reach us. So the electronic monitoring was part of my daily life for the 3 years.
Amazing. There are more questions, but there's no more time. So we ran out of time. We ran out of time. I'll keep the questions and we'll send them over to you ladies to answer if it's okay with you, and we will share the answers with the audience. I wish to thank you all for really amazing, educating, and shaking. I was in some parts of it really experiencing tough feelings with your stories. And I know the stories that Yael shared with us in the past, and Wendy, and now Yasna, and the information shared with, and Luna, and the information shared by Yasna. And I wish to thank you all for your time and for your openness and knowledge sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's hope that we will have a safer world for everybody, everywhere, anywhere, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.